our first speaker, I would like to invite on stage Anouska Shenn. But before I do so, I just want to say that together with her, we are going to discuss simple ways for you guys to integrate wellness and well-being in co-working spaces. Anuska is the founder of the Office Yoga Company, and she's going to join me now to let you know all about it. Hi, Anuska.
Hi, Pauline. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here as well.
Let me start and jump right in. Can I ask you to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Anuska, and I founded the Office Yoga Company, which we deliver well-being sessions on a growing number of topics: yoga, Pilates, mindfulness, breath work, even posture and stress relief. And we've worked with thousands of office workers around the world, about 68 countries at last count. I'm a yoga, breathwork, and mindfulness facilitator. But before I became a well-being person or entered this space, I was in the corporate world myself, and I had a really high-pressure job. Well-being has always been a passion of mine, and this project has been, as many creative projects are, kind of the confluence of a few different passions of mine: biomechanics, neuroscience, and the wisdom of these ancient Eastern practices. So I basically wanted to create practices that could support people's well-being at work, that weren't just what you'd find in a studio, but would be actively trying to counter the negative effects of working at a desk. So that's kind of how we started.
Nice. And one of the first things I wanted to ask you today, because of course we're here to discuss wellness and well-being practices, and for us, we look at the lens of co-working spaces, even if I know that this can be applied to any workspace in general. So as a start, and for people in the audience that are not so familiar with workplace well-being, how would you explain it to them?
Yeah, great question. So workplace well-being is absolutely applicable to co-working spaces, as you say. We've worked with a number of them ourselves. I would describe workplace well-being as just a way of prioritizing and making a commitment to enhancing and supporting how people feel at work, in their minds, in their bodies. Our waking lives, we spend a huge proportion of that at our desks, wherever we happen to work. So we really owe it to ourselves to give more than a passing thought to our habits and our environments when we're working, because it has such a huge impact on how we feel, not just in the office, but the rest of the time as well. How well we sleep, how stressed we are, our immune systems, our energy levels, how we feel in our bodies, so our joints, how our eyes feel, all sorts of things. So, and we know that sitting for long periods is not what our bodies are adapted for. So we need to make efforts to counterbalance that somehow if we want to feel good.
That's so true. I stopped counting how many hours I spent sitting on my chair, but it's now that you say it, it's like we lose the consciousness of constantly being seated, at least for people who work on computers.
Absolutely.
But I think I should definitely count again, and I would be horrified by the amount of hours I spend sitting. But yeah, that's definitely a very good point. And throughout our chat together today, I would love for operators watching this now or later to also understand how they can start implementing more wellness and well-being in their spaces.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how do you approach the topic of wellness and well-being with your clients the very first time you meet with them?
So I usually find out what is motivating them to seek out our services. Usually there's some kind of impetus, whether they've had feedback from a number of people in their team that are experiencing lower back pain, or whether their team has been working to a lot of deadlines and they're feeling quite stressed at the moment. So that's usually a starting point. I know that for co-working spaces, you may not have as much direct access to those comments. There might be more of a layer of static between you and the members. So you could reach out to like a representative from each company, or you could run a poll that's just for all of your members if you are curious about what their main concerns are, especially if you have like more sole traders and freelancers that you want to include in your statistics as well. But as a general rule, I would say that musculoskeletal issues, so back pain, neck pain, that kind of thing, tends to be a really big concern for most people, as well as just feeling stressed. So things we can do to help people feel more relaxed and more comfortable when they're sitting down. When we're talking about offsetting the effects of sitting, we can either sit less or we can change how we sit. There's a duality to the approach. So just encouraging people to move more, however you want to do that, would be a really good start.
And with the office yoga company, and you started to talk about it in the introduction, you said that you design Pilates, and please correct me if I'm wrong or if I forget anything, breath work and mindfulness sessions specifically for people working in offices. So one of the things I wanted also to ask you was, how are those sessions differing from studio classes, for instance?
Yeah, that's a really important question, I think, because I would say that any kind of movement is going to be beneficial. But for people who are quite time pressed, or the kind of people who seek out these classes during the workday because they just want to fit it in, you want to make sure that the movement you're doing is as focused as possible, and that it's really targeting the commonly experienced issues that we face when we're working long hours with a computer or seated. So there are a few things that is just based on the biomechanics of how we sit that we can address through more tailored classes that are specifically designed this way. So that would be strengthening the back chain of the body, for example, because when we sit at a desk for long hours, we tend to have a passive stretch on our back muscles, which weakens them over time and creates tension in the front side of the body. So we want to create more space in the front and strengthen the back. And this is going to help us to create more balance and help us to hold up our posture in a good way. So weakness in these back muscles actually just creates more of the same. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of the more we sit like this, the harder it is to sit up straight. So you would address something like that. And then there's also the mindfulness component that you alluded to, that when we sit for long periods, we tend to forget that we're sitting and we just get really caught up in what we're doing. So we feel a disconnect from our bodies. And something that has been well documented is that mood disorders such as anxiety and depression are linked to this feeling of disconnect from our bodies. It also increases inflammation, and inflammation is part of that. These mood disorders that we think are just in our brain, but it's actually a whole body experience. So thinking of the mind and body together rather than separating them out. By doing more movement, you're creating more mindfulness. So you're kind of getting both at the same time, but you could also just do something that is more static as well, like breath work or mindfulness. And that will also just bring you back into the present moment, which is so helpful for people with who work with a computer.
Just a little question to you for the definitions between, could you explain quickly what's the difference between breath work and mindfulness?
Yeah, certainly. So mindfulness and meditation are kind of used interchangeably, but in reality, mindfulness is a type of meditation. Breath work is a kind of mindfulness. So I hope that wasn't confusing. But mindfulness is just being aware of the present moment in a non-judgmental way. So it's like observing it and allowing it to be without reacting to it or getting caught up in your current state, whether that's a thought or a feeling or a sensation. So, and breath work would be consciously changing your breath, something that is normally not something we think about, and using that to change our mental state, because it works both ways. Our breathing affects how we feel, and how we feel affects our breathing. So you can press one pedal to move the other.
Okay. And another question that's more practical about those sessions.
Yeah.
How long would one session be with you?
It really depends on how much time the client has.
Okay.
You can get a lot out of practicing for a short period of time if you're consistent. For most people, I would say short sessions of as short as even 10 minutes are really beneficial as long as you stay committed to it. You could also do a longer session of an hour where it's more theoretical, like where you learn the theory and the mechanics behind how these work. And that can motivate people to have the discipline to do it themselves so that they don't need a facilitator afterwards. You teach them the processes and they take them away. So that could be another way of doing it. It depends whether you like the instruction each time or whether you just want to know how to do it and then you follow it on your own time.
Okay. We are going to get into it a little bit later in the conversation, but you said also earlier that you started the office yoga company in 2017. So how have you seen, and just also to backpedal a bit, when I gave the introduction to this event, I personally figured out that, wellness and well-being started to become a topic in like the 17th century, which seems like so long ago. And yet it seems like the acceleration of wellness and well-being took quite some time, because it took the 20th century to actually properly and consciously start looking into it seriously. So how have you, from your own lens, seen wellness and well-being at work evolving with the years, and particularly maybe also with the pandemic?
I think there's more competition among companies trying to attract talent to compete on these things that were previously seen as nice to have. They're becoming more of an essential. So things like flexibility, being able to work flexibly, or offering well-being, how in whatever form that is another way to set yourself apart from the competition. And as the workforce shifts towards these younger generations like Gen Z, Gen Y, and so on, like I think there's more of an expectation of our job should be something that we enjoy, not just something we have to do.
Yeah.
So there's definitely more pressure on businesses to offer these kinds of things. And the pandemic fed into that and kind of accelerated the process a bit, because it caused everyone to stop and think about how their work was affecting their mental health, especially, but also their physical health as well, definitely. And just on a more superficial level, you do see trends go in and out. Like yoga was really big at the beginning of the pandemic, and then Pilates took over. And then afterwards, breath work is kind of the big thing right now. There's been quite a few books on the New York Times bestseller list over the past year and a half that are about breathing. So just different cultural influences might change what people are talking about or what people are willing to try as well.
Actually, I just finished reading one book that's called Breath.
By James Nestor.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent book.
Yeah, I would actually recommend it. It's a good point that you're making. Maybe make a few recommendations of books about wellness and how you can become more conscious. But yeah, I really enjoyed reading Breath. And actually, since I've read it, I have to say I also feel more self-aware about the way I'm breathing.
It's brilliant. I'm sorry if you can hear the drilling. I actually, just before this meeting, I popped my head out the window and I asked them not to for the next half an hour, but they've clearly not.
That's so
I apologize if it's disruptive.
That's so good. But yeah, I really learned what was breathing. I completely thought, as he said in the book, there is something very natural and that we take for granted. And now, because I saw that you guys offer breathwork, that's why also I wanted to ask you about defining this and making sure we don't understand it as meditation. It's completely different. But definitely a very interesting thing. And I'm glad to see that it's rising in the office. Very interesting.
It's a very unique tool. Is that really loud?
I mean, I do hear it, but
it's a lot louder for me, I think, luckily.
Okay.
So hopefully you guys can still hear me, but let me know if not. Basically, other animals don't have conscious control of their breath because they don't have the parts of our brain that allow us to take control of that.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's getting better.
I might need to ask them to stop.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I?
No, please go. We are live, and that's like part of the live experience, you guys. Construction work, breaking our how do you say, wellness and well-being bubble. For those of you guys just joining us or watching this, we were live with Anuska, and she's going to come back, where we are talking about simple ways to integrate wellness and well-being within your co-working space or even within any type of workplace, really.
And Pauline, while this is going on, I see a cool question. How important is it to have a dedicated room for wellness in a workspace? Like this is kind of interesting question for people to think about, and maybe you guys can discuss it when the time comes.
I'll definitely ask it to Anuska. Thanks for bringing the question up. Anuska, this is Dimitar.
Hi.
Dimitar.
I'm sorry I missed your question because I was trying to talk to the
No, the
builders
question
and they
is
stopped. That's good.
question is really interesting. How important is it for to have a dedicated room for wellness in a workspace? So,
It was actually on my notes to mention it at some point during our discussion. I think it's a really great thing to have. It shows that it's part of the culture of your workspace, and it encourages people to take initiative. Even if you're not running dedicated classes, it just gives people a space they can go to where they know they won't have to be plugged in, or it gives them a reason to practice while they're working. So just carving out a really small amount of time would make a big difference, and it might give people less guilt than just like booking a meeting room that they think, oh, people might need this for a call and that's more important or something like that. So I think it's a great thing to do.
Awesome. I'll let you guys continue, and thank you for this conversation. It's really interesting to listen.
Thank you.
I'm glad we solved the drilling issue.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I also wanted to ask you was, what's the biggest misconception you see your clients having when it comes to wellness at work?
I would say probably the thing that irks me the most, and I don't know whether this is a misunderstanding or something else, but just that there are some businesses that treat it like a box ticking exercise, and they think that they just need to acknowledge it maybe once in the year on a awareness day, for example, and then they think that's it for them. They've done their job. But I would like to see, and a lot of companies do, that's like definitely the minority. But I would like to see companies incorporate it a little, like integrate it more into the culture and make it a regular commitment and something that they genuinely care about, rather than just
a one-off thing,
symbolically a token class or something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely important. And for us, for instance, that's also why we put this session together, because when I was preparing the event, I realized that for many operators, wellness and well-being seems like a very scary topic because it's so broad, to approach. And it's also like, where do I start? What can I do? Does it requires a lot of investment of all kinds, not just financial, but also time? Yes. And I think for us to have you today here talk about simple ways people can start, and we are going to get to that in a second, is very important, because I think there's no wrong or right way to start approaching the topic. The intention just needs to be there for you to want to do something.
Yeah, you said it. It's about the intention and starting the conversation. So whatever you end up doing, it's going to help people out. It's not going to make things worse. It can only make it better. And it will also start the conversation. So you'll get feedback from people and you'll be able to iterate from there so that you really home in on what they're interested in and what they'd like to see more of.
And I should ask you this question, because all humans, we're always full of good intentions. Now it's going to be the new year. We are going to have a lot of new resolutions. And I see it with myself, right? I'm always saying, okay, this year I'm starting and I do Pilates every day. And then after like maybe, I don't know, a month, I start to become less regular. And then I kind of like find excuses all the time to not show up for myself or not do Pilates. So what are the ways you found were effective in making people or your clients show up more for their personal well-being?
From a business perspective, it's good to have people who are kind of the cheerleaders of the initiative that you're promoting, who can spread the good word and just encourage other people to go. That's always a nice thing to have. And then from a more individual perspective, I would recommend making a ritual out of it. So maybe if you're offering these classes in the first place, or if you're doing them in your own time, to like light a candle or have a special space that you do this in, maybe wear your favorite t-shirt or something, just so that you're making it a part of your day that's special. You could also, I think it's really important to find something that you enjoy. It shouldn't feel like a chore. If it feels like a chore, you're not going to do it. You're not going to keep it up. I see a lot of people, especially like you say in January, who start a really punishing regime and then they feel down on themselves when they don't continue it. But that's just setting yourself up to fail from the beginning. So if you've tried yoga before and you didn't like it, maybe try another teacher or two. If you still don't get on with it, just leave it. Try to think about what you didn't enjoy about it. Was it too slow for you? There are types of yoga that are really dynamic, ones that involve handstands and all sorts of like balancing and strength poses that can be more dynamic than a calisthenics workout. So it's important to try different styles, different teachers, and just find the teacher or the practice that really resonates with you, and that's going to keep you coming back.
Yeah, it's very important. And I also want to emphasize that that's what you offer also, right? Like with the yoga company, if co-working spaces watching this or like now or later would like to start building a program with you, that's definitely something you can do, right?
Yeah, definitely. We can mix and match our classes to create something quite varied, or if you have an idea about what people enjoy, if you have quite an athletic membership, then you might want to offer something more energetic. If you have a lot of stressed out workers, you might want to offer something more calm. So like we'll always work with you and if you work with any supplier like ours, you would always want to have a good consultation and make sure that you get to the bottom of what would serve your people best rather than just a cookie cutter approach.
And what would be, according to you, a good combination of wellness and well-being practices in a co-working space looking like? What should they look like?
I think having a dedicated space like a room for contemplation or for fitness is a great start so that people can take initiative and practice whenever they feel like it. They can book the room out. If you were to offer regular classes, you could put out a poll to find out what people are interested in. But if you worked with a company like ours, and I'm sure other places would be like this too, we try to make them as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So if you come to a class, everyone will feel included, from the person who's never practiced before to somebody who's been doing it their whole life. So a lot of different modifications will be given. And we find that yoga is quite a crowd pleaser in general. So that tends to be our most popular, I would say. And it does include mindfulness and sometimes breath work as well. So it's quite a versatile option if you're unsure of what to pick.
And when you guys start working with companies, do you present the different types of yoga so that everybody can find what would like to start with? Or do you have like different steps to which yoga they should start with?
I tend to pick like the middle path of like something that's in the middle, and then we would do like a survey afterwards where the attendees would let us know what they thought of the intensity, the pace, the instructor, what they'd like to see more of, like more flexibility or more strength, more balancing, more like maybe self-massage or breath work and so on. So, and then we adapt it from that.
I think it's, I'm really happy to have you here today and for you to share all of that, because I also think that besides the session itself, the work you do post-event and post-session about getting to understand better how people felt and how you guys can, keep on improving is so important. Because as you said, I think the purpose is not to do it once, but it's actually to show up more. And the better as a operator or as people running the sessions we understand our public, the more we make sure they come back and they show up for themselves also.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you
so much. I have one more question for you, again targeted at co-working operators, because they are more our people than, let's say, for what would be your one piece of advice for operators currently looking at integrating wellness and well-being into their spaces but feeling a little bit lost on where to start?
I would say that starting with something organized where you create a basic schedule, whether it's a once a month class or a twice a month or once a week, and you shout about it. So you get people to talk about it, you put posters up and you make it, I don't know, you put it on the website as well, however you want to promote it, but you make sure people hear about it and you just see how people respond to it would be a good start. I think each place has its own unique DNA with the community that you've built up. So it's important to experiment and get people's feedback and iterate from there. You won't necessarily know from the beginning what people will enjoy the most. So it's good to give it a go.
And from your experience, how long does it take to actually start to find a proper rhythm or like a routine that works for a company or a team?
I would say that sweet spot happens a lot sooner when the classes are booked more frequently. If you book them too far apart, let's say once a month, and then some of the regulars miss a month, they're going to feel like they've dropped off their practice altogether if they haven't done it in 8 weeks. Whereas if you had a class every week, it's easier to build and sustain a habit. And I would say, I think a lot of I think there's like a science around how habits are formed, but I think around 6 to 8 weeks is when people start feeling encouraged to continue something that they've started.
Okay, so the idea here would be the first 6 to 8 weeks, you guys figure out what works best, but at least there is this routine constantly showing up at least once a week. And then after the 8 weeks, you decide how to move forward and how to refine a little bit the programming.
Yeah, that's a great summary.
How can people connect with you and how can people get to work with you? Because I should also say one of the things I loved about you was that you actually work with anyone from anywhere, not just in London, right?
Yes, that's right. So I forgot to show this slide earlier, but these are just some of the clients we've worked with in the past. But so we work with really large organizations, but also very small startups with only 5 or so people. So people who aren't based in co-working spaces, in fact, up to like the really big multinationals as well. And we've worked with universities and governments. So yeah, all kinds of people virtually. And we do in person as well in London, Edinburgh, and Glasgow.
Oh,
So if
nice.
people
Okay.
do want to stay in touch with us, these are our handles and ways of getting in touch. We have a free monthly newsletter that gives insights on workplace well-being that you can sign up through our website. So you could go through that. You could also follow us on LinkedIn as well, where we post updates from time to time.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely add all of those links into the recap. And I really want to thank you for being with us today because I think you shared a lot of comforting insights, I should say, for people who, like me, are like kind of like beginners. I feel that you gave so many great points on like how to craft an easy strategy or like an easy roadmap towards more wellness and well-being.
Thank you so much, Pauline. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and this is a lovely opportunity to share what I'm passionate about. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, likewise, and I wish you all the best with the construction work.
Thank you.
I hope
today.
I hope it won't stay too long, but it was really nice having you. And as I said, we'll add all the links in the recap of the event so people can connect with you further along.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Pauline. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Anuska. You too. Bye. All right. How funny is this to have a wellness and well-being session with some construction noise in the back? Love it. Back to where we were. So yes, as I said, I hope you guys found it insightful. As always, you have the box at the bottom of the screen. So if you have questions, comments for me, for the speakers, don't be shy. We love questions. We love to interact with you guys as well. Now